Now we're looking here at the blank empty Final Cut Pro, which you are familiar with. I've got nothing in the project at the moment, but I want to just draw your attention to the fact that when we look at the titles options, we are basically looking at an integrated software system called Motion. So all of the effects that you see here are created in a separate sister software package that comes with Final Cut Pro, which is called Motion. Motion you will generally find down on your dock. You can see this funny sort of TV satellite style icon. If it's not on the dock, like with Final Cut, you go into Finder, you go into Applications, and you scroll down and you will find it alphabetically under M. So you can see it there. In this instance, you can either drag and drop it onto your dock, or you can open it directly from the Applications folder. We're going to open it here on the desktop from the dock. Now, initially when it opens, you will see an introductory card which asks you to choose certain forms and formatting for the project you are going to work on. What I'm asking you to do here, if you look at your notes, is to choose a motion project, but to make sure that you go to the preset of Broadcast HD 1080, and most importantly, that the frame rate you select is frames per second. You can also set a duration on the clip you're going to work with. 5 seconds is good enough to start with. And I'm going to open that here. And this is the motion interface. So, as with Final Cut Pro, anything blue is active. So let's just look generally over the interface that we see here. So on the left is the library and the inspector. And these are very similar to the layout of the library and the inspector on Final Cut, just in slightly different positions. If we open the project pane rather, you will see there's a layers, media and audio option. We're not going to go into that for now. It's a little bit complicated. The primary source here is your canvas. This is what you're going to be working with, much the same as the main screen in Final Cut. And the first thing you do is highlight the canvas and go Shift Z on your keyboard to size it. Below the canvas, you will see the timeline. Before any of this makes sense, we need to import material from a Final Cut Pro project. So like Final Cut, our import icon is up here. I'm going to click on import. And I'm going to select just a clip from another member of the band that we've been looking at. This is Dave Marr, who talks about the genesis of the album. So I import this. You can see it pops up on the screen. I'm going to highlight it and again going to go Shift Z just to ensure that the frame size is correct. Now, the canvas where you view everything and you select, transform and animate your elements. The library is used to browse, select and apply effects or behaviors to the objects in your project, as well as to access motion content like particles and gradients, which we will be discussing. And the inspector then allows you to adjust parameters for all effects and objects in your project and to create key frames. Let's start with some basics. So when we click on the canvas itself, you see what pops up is what's called a HUD, a heads up display. This is the little blue button up here, HUD. You can turn it off by turning it grey, or you can turn it on by turning it blue. Whatever is highlighted in the timeline, in this case the main clip, basically the HUD will relate to that particular element of the project. So you can see here there's a limited number of effects. You can have an opacity effect on it where you can fade it down. But let's look at some simple text effects. So first and foremost, having imported this clip, let's imagine that we want to put a title on it. So my options are pretty straightforward. I can click on the little T icon here, go straight onto the canvas where I want the text to be and click. And as soon as I do that, you can see the HUD changes to text. I'm going to type the name, David Marr. If I move my HUD, you will see it there. And underneath that, I'm going to type guitarist. Now, straight away, I have a variety of options here. I can highlight my text, and I can choose from the normal drop-down menu either 2D styles, so you can see straight away they're there, so I can go straight in and I can choose something funky like that. Or you can see my options are 3D styles, and you've got basic 3D options. So if I go into a kind of a flat graphic here, you can see again it changes instantly, and obviously with the HUD, you've got your size control, you've got your tracking, which basically spreads it out or shortens it up, and you've got your line spacing, which increases or decreases the distance between the top of the lower third and the bottom of the lower third. Because it's 3D, we have a depth option, So you can see you can make it more or less in relation to the depth of the material. To keep things simple, I'm just going to go Edit, Undo, and I'm going to move back to the original text that we put in here. Now you can see straight away you have a box around it here. Underneath the normal option, you can see your font option. So if I click here, you can see all the fonts available to you. And as with Final Cut, when you scroll through them, you can see the different fonts that are available to play with. I'm going to pick something kind of that will do fine, the Bondini old style. I'm going to choose that. Once I've chosen that, quite obviously here, I have an option in terms of which color I would like to make it. You can see the color changing here in the background behind it as I scroll through those. I'll leave it white for now. You can also see that I have various options in terms of the size of the text, which I can raise or lower, but you're quite limited in terms of what you can do with the HUD. To properly play with your text, what you need to do is go into the Inspector option. As soon as you go into Inspector, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4 options here: Properties, Behaviors, Filters, and Text. But the important one for now is to highlight text so it's blue, and then look at the 3 options underneath: Format, Appearance, and Layout. This gives us a much larger variety of options available to us. So you can see, obviously, you can choose the fonts, you can choose the size, the alignment, vertical, line spacing, tracking, baseline, etc. And down here we have the scale, the offset, the rotation, slant, various other options. All of these to do, obviously, with the size of the text and the positioning of the text. If we move on to Appearance, you can see that once Appearance becomes blue, we have further options. So for instance, if I go down to Face here and I look at the color of my lettering, I don't want it white, I want to move it to yellow. So I'm going to make the lettering itself yellow. I'll keep the opacity as is. If I go down further here to Outline and turn Outline on, I can then go to my color option, go over to the corner and turn it black. So I get a black rim on the shot, or on the text rather. And then you can see the width of the outline. So I can drag that up and you can see now we get a black border around Dave Marr and Guitarist. You also have the option here of kind of picking a particular line of text. So I'm just going to take the word Guitarist here. So I'm going to go down onto my David Marr, highlight that so it becomes active. You can see it on the timeline there. I'm going to click beside Guitarist and I'm just going to this time highlight the word Guitarist. And then if I go back to Format, I'm going to bring that down a little bit and just make Guitarist slightly smaller. I might also, for the sake of it, appearance-wise, change the color of Guitarist. So I'm going to make that red while David Marr stays in yellow. I can also now choose to go to my, just highlight this again here, highlight option, highlight the entire lot. Remember, text is chosen here. And if I go to my cursor, I get a little box around it. So this allows me to either position it wherever I want on the screen, or if I wish, I can actually rotate the shot also by grabbing the little bar here and put it in at a slightly funkier angle. So you can do something like that, keeping in kind of tone with the sort of rock style approach to the documentary. So that's adding simple, basic text effects by highlighting text and going in and choosing from the options available to us. However, where the fun with motion comes in is when we move on to what are called behaviors. Now, you would assume logically you click on the behaviors tab here, but in fact you will find behaviors in the library. Turn the library blue so you see the library on the screen. You will see a variety of headings down here, but at the top of the list is behaviors. And if I open behaviors, you can see all the various behavior motions available to me. I'm going to go for simple basic motion to begin with, see what the options are here. Rather, I went down to generator there, excuse me, basic motion. And you can see that under the basic motions, there are things like fade in, fade out. If I take a fade in, fade out effect, you can see the effect being applied up here. So it just fades it in and out. Do I want to apply it? Yes. What happens? You now see that a fade in, fade out appears on our timeline here, connected to the David Marr text box. And now when I play the shot by clicking on the play button, you can see his name fades in and fades out. The preset on it is about 5 seconds for each of these behavior effects. If I decide I don't like that, I can highlight it, hit the backspace to remove it, and I can play with some other ones. Now, there are a wide variety of options available to you under the behaviors drop down. You can see 231 in all. I'm going to go down to the end here and I'm going to choose text sequence. When I click on text sequence, you can see this text basic, text continuous, and text energetic. All of these are different styles of effects. If you want to see how they work, you simply click on the chosen one, and it will show you up here what the overall effect is. So that's debris in. If I go down a bit more and go hop in, you can see the text up here hops in like so, and you can see marbles in. So you decide on the effect that you think you want. I'm going to select marbles in at this point, and I'm going to apply. You can see marbles in is now applied. When I play my track, Dave's name comes in like so. Pause it there. Now, at the very end, what I also want is a debris, or rather a marbles out. So this time I'm going to select, again going down, marbles out. And I'm going to apply marbles out to the text track. You can see marbles out here. Now I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to drag it to the end of the text. You can see how short this is. I want this equally short, so I'm going to roll that back, exactly like trimming in Final Cut. I can now bring this to the top. You can see the shorter this is, the faster the text graphic works. So now Dave comes in quickly, is there long enough to read, and goes out the same way. So there's a whole range of options available to you in terms of playing with the way you bring these effects in or out, okay? I should also point out that in the same way we have the behaviors menu in Library, there is a drop-down option for behaviors up here, and you can see everything that you see here in relation to the options for behaviors. You can see here audio options, basic motion, and then as you saw down here, animation, basic, continuous, energetic, glow, highlighter. You just choose whichever effect you want and apply it to the text in question. So if we know we're happy with our effect, and let's just for argument's sake say that we are. So in this instance, what we're basically looking at here is just basically the marbles in, title, and marbles out. And as you know, you can grab the end of these and make them longer or shorter. But our next step is to export the shot if we're happy with it. So we go up to the share icon up here beside the blue HUD. We click on share, we click on export movie. And I'm going to export this. Apple ProRes 444 is a little bit high. I'm going to bring it down to, we'll just bring it down to H.264, which is a standard QuickTime compression. I'm going to go next. I'm going to name it. I'll just call it text test. And I'm saving it into my movies folder, into the extras folder. Save. It takes a couple of seconds to save that. It opens it in QuickTime. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to now minimize motion. I'm going to go to Final Cut Pro. And using the import option from Final Cut Pro, I'm going to navigate to my Macintosh hard drive, my movies folder, my extras folder, test movie, highlight and import. You see it pop up here. I highlight it, and drop it onto my timeline. And now when I play it, you can see we get someone else. So the sons of someone else are I suppose primarily someone else. Now the issue here is that because I've imported it from Motion, what we're actually getting is a compressed shot. In other words, the text is now compressed onto the visual image. I cannot change the size of this. I can't reposition it. It's now been ingrained, layered onto the movie clip itself of the interviewee. So let's look at a secondary option in Motion, which is called the overlay option. And this allows you to import the text separately so you can then do further manipulation with it once you have it overlaid on your image in Final Cut Pro. So for the overlay option, as you can see here, I've cleared the text. The easiest way to do this is simply to go up to Motion, File, New. This allows you to create a new Motion template as you saw previously. So we highlight Motion, we make sure we're on broadcast H2 1080. We change our frame times to 25 frames per second, and the duration of 5 seconds is long enough for a title. You can obviously type in any value you wish here. We're going to open that project. And as before, but this time without importing anything, I'm going to go text. I'm going to click here. I'm going to type David Marr, guitarist. And I'm going to highlight the text, and you can see I have a certain amount of options available to me in my HUD. The font options, I can choose whatever font I want. I'm staying on comic script for both here. You can also see that if I highlight the entire text, I can go to my size option, or I can make it bigger or smaller. But these are the kind of limitations of what you can do with this. You can obviously do coloring as well. Really, for text here, what you need to do, as before, is go into your inspector, select text, go to appearance, select appearance, and this time I'm going to make the David Marr color again yellow. And I'm going to make the guitarist red. And as previously, to make it stand out against the background, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to turn on outline, and I'm going to give it a black outline, and I'm going to make that approximately 3 pixels wide. Okay? What I now do is choose where I want to position it, so I can highlight it again. This time choose my cursor arrow. As you saw me do before, I'm going to move it up here, and I'm going to put a slight rotation on it to give it a slightly more funky look. Now, that seems straightforward enough. Next is deciding what behaviors you want to apply. So remember, with behaviors, you can either go into the library, choose behaviors, choose from your options here. And when you click on this, you see it up here. You see what the effect does. The other option, as I said, is to choose behaviors from here, the drop-down menu up here. So again, if I highlight my text, you can see I can choose the exact same options from here, but you will not see them appear in the little window here if you choose them from this drop-down menu. So unless you know what you're looking for, I recommend you choose behaviors from the library as opposed to behaviors from the drop-down. I'm going something simple here, so I'm just going to use the drop-down. I'm going to go into energetic. I'm going to choose, we'll choose a zap in this time. What does that do? You see it appear here when I play. It comes in like so. And I obviously want a corresponding zap out. So again, I go up to behaviors, text energetic, down to the bottom, and zap out. But note, they appear on top of each other. So I need to grab the zap out. Whoops, sorry. Click out of that for a second. I need to grab the zap out and drag it separately down to the end. I can obviously shorten these. This works exactly the same as with Final Cut when you trim. So I'm just going to shorten them down a little bit. And you can see I now have 5 seconds, and the overall effect, if I bring my scrubber bar back and play, is David's name comes in like so, appears, holds, and then goes out the exact same way. Okay, nice little effect. However, this is the important step. Because this is an overlay, we need to do 2 very specific things. The first is we need to go up to this little rectangle here. We need to click on the drop-down menu, and we need to go transparent. This makes the background transparent. Otherwise, you will have a black background that will overlay your image in Final Cut. The second thing you need to do is hit the share button, export movie, but this time, if you export in H.264, the black background will remain. You need to select Apple ProRes 4444 for the transparency to work. I now go next. We're again going to save this into our extras folder, so I'm going to call this test. I already have a test 2 there. We'll call it test David. Save. Minimize Final Cut, or rather minimize motion, I should say, and open up Final Cut. So this time I've simply exported a straightforward text card. Here's my original one, the test with David Marr included on it. When I highlight this and drop it onto the timeline, you can clearly see, if I Z for zoom and move in, you can clearly see the text is embedded. I can't highlight the text. I can't do anything separate with the text because it's embedded onto the picture. So this time what I'm going to do is import 2 things. I'm going to go to my SOSU folder, which is on my desktop. And I'm going to choose from the interviews option the same piece, Genesis of Album 2, import selected. I'm then going to go import, and this time I'm going to go to my hard drive, and I'm going to go to movies, and I'm going to go to extras, and I'm going to import the test David movie. So let's look at the 2 of these. We have our test with the embedded text, we have the same clip without the embedded text, and we have the test David, okay? So highlight, delete, take the original and drop, take the test, and this time we'll just append it to the timeline here, or rather connect it to the timeline here, and you can clearly see the background is transparent and the text appears like so. Okay, so it comes in like so, goes out like so. Now what's nice about this is that I can highlight it, and once it's highlighted, I can obviously choose this as a separate piece. So I can go to transform, for instance. I can take the transform option, and you can see with my transform, I can further change the position of where I want the text to be. If I'm not happy with the size of it, I can increase the size of it. So I have a variety of options when I bring my text in transparently, okay? But it is important to remember with the transparent option the two settings that you need to do in motion, which are basically very straightforward, but as follows. You need to choose the transparent option here, and then when you are sharing, you need to ensure that when you export your movie, you have chosen Apple ProRes 4444, or else it won't work. We're now going to have a quick look at the particle emitters just for a bit of fun, give you an idea of what you can do with them. You will find particle emitters in the library. So library blue, if we scroll down here, you will see particle emitters. When I click on that, you see the options available. So they're subheaded here. There are 209 items in all. I'll go for something simple like smoke. I have a couple of options here. I'm going to go for the steam vent option. What does that look like? You can see it here. So I apply to the screen and you can see it pop up down here. Highlight it, play, and there's our smoke. Okay, so what I need to do is rotate it. I'm going to rotate it that away. Sorry, it's a little bit fecky on the keyboard here. I'm going to get the steam vent out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Remember, anything that's highlighted down here, the HUD will give you information relating to it. I'm going to move this over so it looks like it's coming out of David's ear. And you can see I have options here. Birth rate will increase the intensity of it. Life will make it last longer. Scale will make it bigger or smaller. So I'm doing those adjustments on that one. Now I'm going back to steam vent, smoke, steam vent, and I'm applying a second steam vent. With the second one, again, if I play here, you can see it's popped up, but I want it to come at the start, so I drag it back. Again, I highlight it. Again, I rotate it. I can big up the birth rate, I can big up the life, and I can bring up the scale if so desired. All right, so it's positioned wherever I want it to be positioned by moving my little arrow option here. I want it coming out, as I said, of David's ear. So now when I play, you can clearly see we've got smoke coming out of David's ears. Okay, and again, then it's simply just a question of share, export movie. Next, smoke, again saving it into the extras folder. Once that's saved, we go back to Final Cut Pro, close down the QuickTime, sorry, back to Final Cut Pro, and this time import, and I'm going to my Macintosh hard drive, my movies, my extras, and I'm going to smoke. Import selected, smoke is now here. Get rid of this stuff which we've looked at already. Drop smoke onto the timeline. And you can see we have our pre-created animated effect. David with smoke coming out of his ears. Again, if we just look at the motion interface, you will see that there's a variety of options available to you in terms of these particles. You know, black smoke, cartoon smoke trail, shoot smoke. And there's a whole other range here. So pyro effects are explosions and diesel fires. You can make things look like they're blowing up. Fireworks effects, flaming trail with smoke, etc., etc. So there's a whole range of animation available to you in motion that you wouldn't be able to do with the presets in Final Cut, which is why it's an important addition to the software. So continuing to work with the same clip, let's finally just look at working with keyframes within the motion interface. You've seen keyframes in relation to Final Cut Pro. You understand the basis of how they work. Motion has its own set of keyframes. Let's just take a very simple example here. I'm going to get the emitter out of the way so you can see the screen. Remember always to double check by highlighting your canvas and going Shift Z so the canvas is properly framed. So what do we want to do here? We take something very, very simple. The easiest way to work with keyframes is to turn on recording. Recording is the red button on the timeline. You can see it just here, the little red option button here. And it's red when it's on, like so. Okay, full red ball. Now what you can do here is I can literally move my scrubber bar. We'll move it in. You can see my timeline above me, 1 second, 2 seconds. So I'm going to move it in approximately 2 seconds. I'm now going to go to the inspector, and on the inspector I'm going to choose properties, and you will notice now that these little icons are red. So a simple effect here. Motion will automatically put a keyframe at the start of your clip. Okay, what I'm going to do here now is with my keyframe position 2 seconds in, I'm going to shrink this clip down to nothing. Then I'm going to move my scrubber bar forward to 4 seconds, and at 4 seconds I'm going to bring my scale back up to fill the shot and get the smoke back lined up with David's ears. That's it done. I can turn record off, bring my scrubber bar back to the start, and you can see the effect is there. It shrinks down, it pops back up. Again, not a great example, but just to kind of make it clear to you that there are 101 options available to you with this interface. We could equally spend 12 weeks with Motion in terms of playing around with all these keyframe options and the effects that you can do with it. Suffice to say, that's down to you in your own time, given the time frame of the course we had. But I felt it was important to finish up our video tutorials by just giving you a brief introduction to Motion. There's obviously a help window up at the top of the screen, probably off your QuickTime screens here, but the help is in the usual place. And the interface is also very, very similar to the Final Cut Pro interface. So if you are interested and you do have the software, feel free to play around, as this is what we would normally be using this time of year to apply specific effects, to apply lower third graphics, etc., for our TV shows and our ENGs.